Session. Could we please start the roll call?
Yes, Mayor Coombs?
Here.
Council members Bagley?
Here.
Christensen? Here. Finley? Here. Levison? Here. Moore?
Here.
Santos?
Here.
Mayor Coombs, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their name on the list will have their opportunity to speak during the public hearing items this evening or at final call public invited to be heard on any item at the end of the meeting. Valerie, are there any agenda revisions or submissions of documents?
Yes, Mayor Coombs, there were three items added after the original agenda went out. They have been posted on the web and on our posting boards, but they will be consent agenda items 9F, which is an ordinance having to do with expenses and liabilities of the city. Item 9G will be a resolution having to do with an intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County for a wage and benefit reimbursement grant. And item 9H will be to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a Longmont Community Health Network grant. And we will add those items to the consent. And then additionally, there was a revised ordinance for 9B that was sent out. It's the broadband utility revenue bonds. The version that was that will replace the version in your packet. And basically, there were just formatting changes and no substantive changes to that.
Is there a report from the city manager?
Mayor, Council, Sandy Cedar has some brief comments.
Mayor Coombs, members of City Council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I just wanted to clarify about our legislative process and regarding an email that you all received from me yesterday. During the legislative process, specifically state and federal bills come forward. They have all sorts of different conversations, amendments are made. Staff takes a look at these bills as they come in, and when we have time and feel that there is some sort of significant municipal impact, we try very hard to get those on your agenda for your consideration with plenty of time to be able to take a look at them. Sometimes bills come up or become more hot topics at different times, and hence is the case with Senate Bill 93, which I sent to you yesterday. I want to clarify that the council can take a position on any kind of legislation pretty much anytime, anywhere. It's not part of your rulemaking process. It's part of their rulemaking process that we are commenting about. So you can make those kinds of motions at any point. Previous council direction around oil and gas legislation was that I give you the information, and if there's something you'd like to do with that information, you're certainly welcome to, as it is with any other bill. The intention of the email last night was to be able to give you Senate Bill 93, tell you a little bit about what the staff analysis is, and there is no staff recommendation on any kind of position. So I just wanted to clarify that for you so that if you had any kinds of questions, I can answer those for you.
Okay, thank you. Hey, go ahead and ask.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. When are they voting? When will that come to a vote down in Denver?
Mayor Coombs, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, it really does depend. It has already passed the Senate and has been assigned to Judiciary. It will likely be in committee probably next week. My guess is that it will pass before your next meeting on the 18th.
So it's either tonight or never.
It's tough at the state. Sometimes those things hit snags and then they slow down. If the council would like for me to bring it for some sort of consideration on the 18th, I'd be happy to do that. But mostly it was getting the information to you since you won't be meeting for a couple of weeks.
My only concern is, I know that tonight's caucus, and I know there are a lot of people with an opinion one way or another, but my concern is if we don't just have a discussion tonight, we're never going to discuss it. And if we don't discuss it, it means that we bailed, and people will view that as either a yes or a no, depending on what side of the political aisle they fall on. So I would actually suggest that we spend a few minutes and just hammer it out now. Or later on in the meeting, it's your meeting there.
I think that should be done under the council comments at the end of the mayor and council comments towards the end of the meeting. Councilmember Levison.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandy, can you flesh out a couple of other possibilities also? I I received some informational emails about this item, and there was an indication there had been some amendments proposed that weren't added after discussion. Is it possible that when it goes to the House that amendments could be made and the bill could look totally different again?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Levison, that's always the case. Most of those amendments would happen in committee. Committee is also where most of the bills either live to move on or die. In this case, those amendments certainly could be tried again, or there could be new pieces, and it's always changing. So once the council takes a position on any bill, we watch it very closely to make sure that there aren't amendments that change substantively what's happened with the bill. We have been in situations where we've even sponsored legislation that later we've asked to be killed because of the amendments that have happened. It's always fun.
And as a matter of information, when we're down at Policy Committee at Colorado Municipal League, sometimes the direction or suggestion from staff is a position, but discretion to take action if amended, if not amended, a whole list of things. So that's also an option. And then this was not brought up in the Municipal League Executive Board meeting as a position to take on. This bill wasn't even discussed. Can you explain if the Municipal League, which represents city interests across the state, if they've taken a position on the bill?
Yes, Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Levison. Valerie Skitt was down at CML today and asked that question for me. Essentially, CML has taken a monitor position on this bill. Let me explain a little bit about it. Senate Bill 93 clarifies that oil and gas companies, as well as electric and telecommunication companies, would have the ability to serve eminent domain on private property. It's unclear as to whether city property would be affected by this, but because it's not listed specifically in the bill, it indicates that it would not be included. And so there could be no eminent domain proceedings on public property or public lands by the oil and gas companies. And that's a probably, right? Because there's no amendment, the amendments have not gone through, the bill has not passed. That's a probably kind of conversation at this point. The oil and gas companies have thought they've had this right for the last 107 years. And it was only in 2012 that the Supreme Court basically came in and said, you don't. This law does not apply to oil and gas pipeline companies. And so only the last 2 years have the oil and gas companies known that they don't have the right of eminent domain. CML chose to take a monitor position on this because they didn't abuse it in the first 107 years. The chances are unlikely that they would abuse it at this point. And so in their opinion, this was not something that was a new right of oil and gas companies, but instead the legislative cleanup bill that I think some have thought. There are definitely multiple positions and perspectives on this bill. Some would say that this is an extension of oil and gas company rights, and some would say this is just cleanup of what they thought they already had. Because there's no significant municipal impact, this is not a bill that the city staff decided to bring to you, but wanted to make sure that you had the information as you started to see some of these conversations flow.
Thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
Are we going to discuss this later then?
Yeah,
All right.
during the mayor and council comments. All right, I guess the first person on the list for first call public invited to be heard is James Kenworthy. So please come down and state your name and address for the record. He'll be followed by Bob Peck.
Let me turn that off.
Okay, James Kenworthy, 107 Caribou Place. I'm here to talk about the eminent domain issue. What a surprise. I learned about this about 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I may repeat myself. But the first thing I'd like to say is telephone lines do not leak oil. Pipelines do. And there's a lot of chit-chat about pipelines being safer than train or truck transportation. I have a hard time believing that, because if you check in the news, if you look on the internet, pipelines leak all the time, and they will leak, and they do leak. So you wrote a good memo. And at the bottom of that memo, there was a link to an article I read the article, and I'm going to talk about one of the paragraphs in the article. It's a quote by Stan Dempsey, president of the Colorado Petroleum Association. And here's his quote. Our members are extremely reluctant to exercise powers of condemnation. I have a hard time believing this. Matter of fact, I think it's an arrogant lie. And here's the rest of the quote. But if Colorado oil production continues to grow, as it will, it's going to need the pipeline infrastructure to export its products. Okay, they're going to export the products. We're not going to get the benefit of them if there is any benefit. Where? To states, and I think when he says states, he means states and countries, where they fetch a higher volume of interest. That's money. That's profit. The Colorado Petroleum Association is interested in maximizing their profits. And in order to do that, they will maximize the dangers to our health and safety. So here's the deal. It's clear. It's the money machine on one side, and it's the people on the other side. You've got clear choices. And why are those choices so clear? We've been living under a corporate system for about the last 50 years. We didn't know about it for a while, but some of us are waking up. So this is your chance to show us which side you are on. Okay, hold on. I got to check my notes. It doesn't make a difference if Republicans or Democrats support this bill. It's not about politics. It's about people versus a money machine. I'm going to repeat myself. The corporations... sorry. Thank you very much.
3 minutes are up. Thank you, James. Bob Peck.
Bob Peck, 1935 Spruce Avenue in Longmont. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, I'm here tonight to address you about the recently passed Senate Bill 93. It passed 25 to 10. The next step is it goes to a House committee. If it makes it out of that committee, and that committee killed this bill last year when it came up, the House will vote on it, I think, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The bill gives a private entity the authority to exercise eminent domain on private property. Any bill that gives away public authority to an entity that acts only in its own interests is bad public policy. The private sector is driven by, for the most part, one thing, and that's money. It's unencumbered by the principle to act in the public interest. I'm not a big fan of eminent domain, even if it's in the hands of local officials like yourselves. But if it's in your hands, I can come to you and have a chance of being heard. You might have one deaf ear. The people who want to enact this on private property have 2 deaf ears. Make no mistake, the people want as much local control as possible. That point should be abundantly clear to everyone on council. I'm asking that you oppose this bill, whether it's by resolution or whatever means you find necessary, and let that feeling be known to people on the state level as quickly as possible, because this is coming up very rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Padma.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and council members. My name is Padma Wick. My address is 4213 Frederick Circle in Longmont. Senate Bill 93 allows oil and gas companies the right of, quote, eminent domain. That wording is in the bill and means private companies can, quote, take our property, and yours also. I'm certain that Longmont citizens, regardless of their politics, do not want oil and gas companies to be able to drill and lay pipelines wherever they wish by, quote, taking, and that is the language in the bill, their property. This is supposedly a legislative fix to a 2012 Supreme Court decision where the court held that the eminent domain statute did not apply to oil and gas. Indeed, this is a fix because they are fixing to take our property. Longmont citizens, if informed, would oppose this and want you all to protect their property. It's hard to believe that you will actually be voting on whether or not to support this without having properly informed constituents. You haven't informed constituents about this. You haven't held public hearings. You don't even have this item posted on your agenda. It's just been coming up this evening. And indeed, most Longmont citizens don't even know about this bill and would certainly not support it if they did. So I know urgency, 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 but how could you possibly represent the public on this issue? Before you even consider such a vote, the public must know that you're about to support, quote, a taking. Again, that's the language from the bill, of their property. I and many others urge you to vote against any support of this taking. Your constituents will learn how all of you voted on this. Thank you.
Dwayne Lees.
My name is Dwayne Lees. I live at 2686 Pearl Howlett Road, Longmont. Mayor Coombs, City Council members, I think you're all very, very, very aware that Longmont voted to have a fracking ban inside of the city limits. It seems to me, by my reading of this, you're giving eminent domain to either private or foreign companies, and that could override the 60% vote inside the city limits of Longmont. Who do you represent? Who do you represent? Your only authority comes from the people of Longmont. You have a responsibility to represent the will of the people of Longmont. And to think that this is even being offered as a bill in our state legislature to give a foreign entity authorization to take from our citizens. This is wrong-headed. It's upside down. It's inside out. What is government for? What is it for? Who gives authority to anybody to govern? And that's what one of the geniuses of our Constitution was. It comes from the individuals, not from the corporations. It comes from us. Me, you, these people. Stop this. Please. Please. So I hope that you vote not just no, but hell no. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Strider Benston.
Oh, greetings. I'm Strider Benson, 951 17th Avenue. In a little different mode. I I haven't been able to get down here for a couple of months. As you may know, if you're on two wheels, it has been severely dangerous. So much so that it wasn't even possible to get here. Except 2 weeks ago, I came down here and everybody left. So I got here once, but nobody else was here. I had thought to talk about some of our state governments. It's like we've achieved new levels of corruption, and we've always thought of West Virginia or Illinois or maybe Florida, where the governor bought the governorship with the $1,700,000,000 he stole from Medicare and Medicaid, and where you have license to kill anyone you want if your color is right or whatever. And then, of course, there was New Jersey, which is just beginning. Billions misappropriated and stolen funds. We'll find out after a while. But a new thing came up. It's called Ukraine. All right, let's take a look at what's going on. As we know, President Bush started a couple of wars, sort of which are still going on, destroyed a couple of countries, hundreds of thousands of people killed, including thousands of Americans. And then we got all right, what happened when Putin did some military aggression during George Bush's term in a little place called Georgia? Well, he said, I looked into Putin's soul, and he's a trustworthy man. So we didn't do anything. Now the very same people that said, hey, that's okay, now they're screaming to undercut our president, who's trying to figure out what's going on and what can be done in a very, very difficult and complex situation. 50 years ago, as much as I might disagree with the other side on questions, at least they thought about the country. They thought in terms of how do you deal with a very difficult situation. And now what we have is, let's just shoot from the hip. There's a political party whose only point is to destroy the operation of the government, break up the national unity, and we better take that seriously, because you see it coming down in local and state elections. Look at North Carolina. The whole poisoned rivers, West Virginia, North Carolina, and they destroyed their Department of Environmental and Natural Affairs. How'd they do that? Private corruption on the part of the governor. Let's look at what's going on here. Be awake. Thank you.
Thank you, Strider. Okay, that ends first call public invited to be heard. So now we are going to go to consent agenda.
Mayor Coombs, first item on your consent agenda is ordinance 2014-11, a bill for an ordinance approving the land use amendment to the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan for Maxwell Place, generally located south of Pike Road and west of Renaissance Drive. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for March 18th. Item 9B is ordinance 2014-12, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the City of Longmont Electric and Broadband Utility Enterprise Fund bonds. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for March 18th. Item 9C is Resolution R 2014-25, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Boulder County for free local bus service on the Longmont 300 series route. Item 9D is Resolution 2014-26, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and St. Vrain Valley School District for the provision of educational history, culture, and art classes and workshops. Item 9E is Resolution 2014-27, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and the St. Vrain Valley School District RE1J for the provision of a wide area network. Item 9F is Ordinance 2014-13, making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2014. Item 9G is Resolution 2014-28, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Boulder County for a wage and benefit reimbursement grant. And item 9H is approve and authorize the mayor to sign a Longmont Community Health Network grant. And staff would like to pull items B, G, and H for short presentations.
You said B, C, and H?
B, G, and H.
Okay. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move the consent agenda minus B, G, and H.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
So item 9B is the ordinance 2014-12 regarding the broadband, electric and broadband utility enterprise revenue bonds, and Jim Golden will make this presentation.
Mayor's member of council, I'm Jim Golden, city's director of finance. And again, this is first reading of the ordinance for the issuance of the 2014 electric and broadband revenue bonds. As you know, in November, the voters approved the issuance of up to $45.3 million of the bonds to finance the construction of the community-wide fiber optic network. So staff's been working over the past few months or so on this proposed financing, including the drafting of the official statement and review of the accompanying documents, including the ordinance which is being considered here tonight, the registrar on pay and agent agreement, and the continuing disclosure certificate. The ordinance, as well as all those other documents, are available for review in the city clerk's office currently. So last May, the staff brought to the council a feasibility study for the broadband effort, and council directed staff to return with some financing options. And so during the summer, we did bring some back to you, and the direction that you did give to staff is to pursue the revenue bond option, which was to combine the electric fund and the telecommunications funds that previously were separate enterprise funds, and to combine them into one electric and broadband utility enterprise fund, so that the electric utility rates could serve as the fallback for the debt service repayment in the event that the broadband effort could not successfully cover ongoing expenses as well as bonded debt expenses. So at that time, staff estimated a project cost of $35.5 million for the broadband effort. The financing proposal also included capitalized interest on the bonds for 2 years and a debt service reserve. So we were also at that time last summer, we're using very conservative interest rate estimates because of how long it would be between before we could actually sell the bonds. So the overall bond issue was set for a maximum issuance of $45.3 million. So we've been working to set the structure for the bonds here in 2014. One of the things is we've determined that the bond will include $37.5 million for the broadband project. That's $2 million greater than what was originally indicated. The increase is necessary as the feasibility study was completed in late 2012, and it's been updated to reflect some now known or expected adjustments. The major adjustments were for billing software. Originally, it was thought the city's current utility billing software could handle the broadband billing needs. Since that time, it's been determined the current system does not have the flexibility and the capabilities needed to meet the dynamic nature of internet and voice services. The second adjustment is that we have additional equipment needed for the school district project, and there will be associated revenues from the district from that the services being provided there. And then the third item was a 5% contingency on system construction costs to cover potential price increases anticipated in the labor component. So we will be able to issue the bonds and generate the $37.5 million for the project and still stay within the authorized limit of $45.3 million. This is because of the current interest rate environment versus the conservative estimates that were made last summer. In addition, the market for municipal debt prefers that a premium be included, which will allow the city to have a lower par amount on its bonds. Now, if no debt reserve is necessary, bond proceeds are estimated to be just less than $41 million. But if a debt reserve is required, the bond proceeds will be close to $45.3 million. In your council communication for tonight, I provided information on the structure based on an issue without a debt service reserve. And that information is on the cover of your communication. So we estimated that in about a month ago, these estimates are from the market time and about a month ago, that we would have we estimate an annual payment of $3.788 million beginning in 2017. We had bond proceeds used to make capitalized interest payments in 14 and 15 of approximately $1.25 million and $1.778 million. And then system revenues will make subsequent payments beginning with an interest-only payment of approximately $1.778 million in 16 and principal and interest of $3.788 million from 2017 through 2029. So that's the structure without a debt service reserve. And obviously that is our preferred approach because it lowers the amount of financing and in turn the debt service costs over the life of the issue. Staff did meet with credit analysts from Standard & Poor's this morning as we've requested a credit assessment analysis on the bonds. The ratings presentation was very strong, and staff, including the City Manager Harold Dominguez, LPC Director Tom Roniotis, LPC Business Manager Susan Weisskopf, and LPC Rate Analyst Kate Medina, they all did a great job providing supporting information both this morning as well as over recent weeks leading up to the meeting. And as well, we did have further staff, Sandy Cedar, Rigo Leal, and Matt Sheppers all were involved in taking the analysts on a tour of the community this morning as well. So, although that went well, we believe we should be prepared to add a debt service reserve to the structure to strengthen the credit rating and the perceived credit worthiness of our proposed bonds. We'll not receive word back on the assessment till the end of the week or later, but we want to be prepared to add the debt service reserve to the structure if needed. So I'd like to specify the structure and the details of the issue with a debt service reserve since I left that out of the original communication. And what I'll do is I'll add them to the council communication for the second reading and public hearing of the ordinance. So with the debt service reserve, the bond issue is projected at the total amount of $45.3 million. It includes $39,465,000 of par amount of bonds with $5.835 million of premium. Excuse me. The bond proceeds will be used to make capitalized interest payments in 14 and 15 of approximately $1.386 million and $1.973 million. And then system revenues projected to make the subsequent payments beginning with interest-only payments of $1.973 million in 2016 and principal and interest of approximately $3.988 million from 2017 through 2029. So the debt service reserve would be used to make the final payment in the year 2030. And one key difference between these two structures, with the debt service reserve, the bond will be a 16-year bond instead of a 15-year bond without the debt service reserve. The proposed ordinance that you have on first reading tonight, in section 921 of the ordinance, there's a requirement that we maintain 125% level of coverage. What that means is that we're going to take our gross pledged revenues each year from both utilities, and we'll be subtracting our operating expenses, which do not include depreciation expense or the franchise fee paid to the city's general fund. And that will take us to the net pledged revenues. And that amount needs to be 125% of the maximum annual debt service on the bond. So we've made part of our ordinance in the calculation of this coverage factor. We've removed franchise fees from operating expenses, so we've made them subordinate to the debt service payment of the bonds. So if any time during the life of the bonds the net pledged revenues fall below 125%, we're required to raise the electric rates enough to get it back to 125% coverage. Under the 2014 budget, as built and projected with the revenues that were put together through the study from Uptown that the feasibility study done last year, we will have coverage of 2.37% in 2014. And then that grows year by year until we see 3.84 coverage in 2019. So the only threat to that is if we don't meet the revenue projections as put together in the feasibility study, then the rate might need to be increased if it were to drop as far as 1.25%. The city charter requires the bonds be sold at public sale, so we have tentatively scheduled that for April 1st. We have D. Weiser of Butler Snow is here tonight. He's our bond counsel, and he has prepared the ordinance. So if you have questions on the ordinance or the other reference documents, he's here for that purpose. The ordinance establishes in Article 2, Section 213, parameters for the sale of the bonds. It's the limits on the principal amount and the interest rate, maturity, and purchase price. And it directs that the finance director or the city manager accept the best bid, which is within those parameters. And that's in accordance with the Supplemental Public Securities Act, which authorizes this type of delegation. So we will report the results of the sale to the council at the study session on the night of April 1st. And also here tonight, Jim Manier, our financial advisor from First Southwest, and he was part of the team this morning that met with the rating agency and he also has worked with us on structuring the deal to this point, and he's also here to help answer any questions. So that's the extent of my presentation. We're ready for questions if you have any.
Councilmember Baldwin. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess two questions. First, as it stands right now, what would the electric rates and basically our net income needs to cover 125% of the outstanding debt? What would it be right now? I mean, like what percentage?
So as I stated, under the 2014 budget, it would be 2.37 currently.
Meaning?
Instead of 1.25, we have
Right.
2.37.
Gotcha. So in other words, we've got.
If we meet the revenue
We're way
projections
over.
that we have currently, then that.
Gotcha. That was okay. Great news. And the second, if I wanted to buy bonds, if I wanted to purchase these bonds, I'm going to buy some. So who do we go to? Who do we call?
It's a little early for that, but
let us know, though.
On the night of April 1st, we'll be able to tell you who was the winning bidder, and then we'll try to tie you into that, which is usually some syndicates way away from here that will be hard to get a hold of.
I'm sure, but I think it'd be cool to hold Longmont munis. Thank you.
So what is the rating that are we double A? Or is that to be decided?
It's at this point in time, we'll get a early read, an analysis. It's not going to give us the actual rating. It'll kind of give us a high, medium, low hint at the end of this week or early next week. We're hoping, the best situation would be a double A rating, and it's also possible we'll be in a A plus or double A minus. Wait and see the result.
All right, thank you.
That.
Councilmember Rosen.
Thank you. Councilmember Bagley took the question I usually ask, and we do get it out there where you can buy them and what increments, and a lot of the previous issues have been like $5,000, so it's a good way to invest $5,000, and I don't have that much money to invest in a bond, but others may. The other point that I like to bring up is that these bonds, because they're a utility bond, would be tax-free, right?
Yeah, as municipal bonds, they'll be tax exempt.
Bond.
Yes.
Okay. All right, fine. And then when we're looking at the structure of the rates, I'm just making sure I understand this properly. The broadband enterprise within the larger enterprise really has to pay this bond itself. We can't. I just want to make sure I understand that we're not going to take electric utility customers who are not wanting to subscribe to the broadband services to underwrite the broadband services if we don't make that goal to be paying back the debt by subscribers.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, so by combining the utilities last year and giving us that direction to issue electric and broadband utility revenue bonds. The answer to your question is yes, they would be potentially on the hook if the broadband utility was unable to generate the revenue to cover the bonds. Then the electric rate needs to step in and cover it.
And so will this tie the council's hands? That's an automatic rise because of the debt has to be paid, but that would override the council's budget decision. You couldn't just decide in the budget you're not raising the rates.
These bonds are not subject to annual appropriations.
Okay.
This is,
okay. All right. Fine. I just want to make sure we're getting all that information out there. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, Jim. I make a motion that we pass ordinance 2014-12.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is Resolution 2014-28, which is the Boulder County Wage and Benefit Reimbursement Grant. Kim Sugar's here to introduce this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to take a minute and highlight this opportunity. With this grant, this will allow the city to hire 4 individuals, 3 what we're calling grounds maintenance tech to work in the field, as well as 1 volunteer coordinator to help clean up areas impacted by the flood that are not eligible for FEMA reimbursement. In addition, what we would like to do with this, or what we are going to do is, in conjunction with Cleanup Greenup, we are putting together a variety of volunteer opportunities. As you've probably heard before, we do have about 3,000 members of the community right now that really would like to help volunteer. So with these additional positions, this will really give us the opportunity to let the community participate in cleanup and help us address those areas that we currently don't have funding for. So with that, if you have any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Finley.
I think that sounds great. Could this person also maybe, or these people, put out some sort of information on our website about how private property owners, the homeowners, could clean up some of this stuff in their yards? They're not really sure what to do with this dried sludge and rocks and things that are now in their yards and how to clean that up. And some information on that would be helpful.
So these positions will just be staff working for the city, so they won't be able to provide that information, but I believe Sandy can direct where that can be found.
Yes, Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Finley. Any kind of individual assistance needs for cleanup or even, help with utilities or any of those types of things are going through the Boulder County Long-Term Recovery Group. And that information is all on the website, and I will give you that address in just 1 second. But essentially what they're doing is a clearinghouse. And so these are mostly private funds, or they are nonprofit organizations that are willing to come in and help private folks with either debris removal or cleanup or even monetary assistance, depending on what their needs are. So we really ask people to get on that website and to be able to just talk a little bit about what their needs are. If people are interested in volunteering also to help these folks, that's the same exact place to go. So let me tell you what that website is. It is bocofloodrecovery.org. And so if you go there, you can either ask for individual assistance, you can help volunteer for others to help others. And the group that Ken is talking about is part of the NEG federal grants to help put people to work that were impacted by flood. And so if they lost their job due to the flood in the first place, and they qualify for this program, and then Ken will interview them and be able to have Boulder County pay a significant piece of it. But it really is for work that is not FEMA eligible but flood related in the municipalities and counties.
Councilmember Christensen.
Actually, that's the question I had, is where people can go, because there's still a lot of enthusiasm for people to volunteer, and we don't want to lose momentum, and that would be great for the town. So thank you.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I move resolution 2014-28.
Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, it passes 7-0.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Councilmember Finley, where are you hearing, where do these folks live?
In the Greens.
Okay.
Mayor Coombs, the next item is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a Longmont Community Health Network grant, and Dan Heeman is here to make this presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members, and council, and I think I'd like to start by how nice it is to be talking to you about something that is not flood-related. So I'm here representing the Longmont Community Health Network. We've talked to you briefly about that in the past, and I'm really here as one of the partner agencies. This was a grant written by the network, of which the city is just one of the partners, and by the city I'm really talking about the Public Safety Department and Community Services are really heavily involved in this effort. This is a pretty exciting thing for us. This is a Colorado Health Foundation grant for almost $500,000. No city match, and it's really going to allow us to get started on a number of different things that the network really wants to engage in. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through a little bit of what the program is going to do with the visual up there. Really what we're going to do is, it's a 2-year grant, and we're going to hire 2 paramedics and an administrative person. There's a vehicle attached, there's training money, and it's one of the most flexible grants that I've ever been a part of, which is a wonderful thing for this program. We have a lot of flexibility in this to change directions, move around as we need to, because it's really about trying to discover what's possible. The only real deliverables we have is we're supposed to see 750 people in 2 years, which should be no problem, and we're supposed to deliver a sustainability plan. Because one of the things the Health Foundation wants to get out of this is a template that can be applied to any community in Colorado. So we're going to be a little bit of a test case for this, but we're more than ready. So the start of the service is really going to be directed by a clinic. It's physician-directed follow-ups, which is the bottom level on there. It's the level 1 care. And there's a couple different versions of that. One is basically to check on at-risk patients that miss an appointment, or just a quick follow-up. A physician would like a blood pressure check on one of their patients. So what these paramedics will do is visit that patient in their home and take that opportunity to do a couple of different things. The primary care community never gets inside a patient's home, and I think that's one of the gigantic gaps. So one of the things we'll do is do some screenings, some mental health, substance abuse screenings, an environmental scan, some medication reconciliation, and get all that information back to the primary care provider. And in some cases, that may be it. That may be all they're looking for, which is great. We're going to build some triggers into this, some automatic trigger visits for things like newly diagnosed diabetic patients. If you're sitting in a doctor's office and they tell you, congratulations, you have diabetes, you pretty much shut off at that point, and everything else they told you after that you didn't really get. So one of the things we're trying to do is follow up immediately with the start of an education process and do all of those in-home things again. And then what we'll do with a lot of those screenings is that's when the network partners really get involved. We have mental health partners, the hospital, Boulder County Public Health, all are really integral parts of this network, and what they're going to do is take a look at all these different screenings and kind of triage them and determine if there's additional needs that this patient may have. And what we'll do with that information is contact the primary care provider and the patient and put together a care plan. Make this a real patient-directed service. And then what our network partners are going to do is kind of fill in all the gaps that we don't have. So these paramedics are not experts in giving mental health treatment or chronic disease management. So we're going to get some training, but the network partners are also going to help us with these in-home visits. And that's really what Level 2 Care is all about. That's what we start doing, connections to existing social services, really connecting people to things like Meals on Wheels, VIA, our center, all of the things that exist in our community that patients may not know about. And what we'll do as part of that process is really start to empower the patient. I think that's one of the important things about this process is it's very educational, it's very based on the patient's needs, and really we want to get these patients to the point where they can advocate for their own healthcare needs. And we think that's about a 60 to 90 day process, and then we transition back to the primary care provider. And then it's just kind of we'll continue on with that process. The very top box, the level 3, is not addressed by the grant. It was originally, but there's a little bit of negotiation back and forth, and that's kind of the sickest 5% of our community. This grant is not specifically targeting that, but it's on the radar of the network as a whole. A couple of the things we want to find out from the grant is we really want to investigate how technology can play a role in this. You know, we're kind of envisioning the paramedic with an iPad in the patient's living room, you know, FaceTiming the doctor. Can we get specialists on the line right there through FaceTime? What can we do with technology that's going to really improve the lives of our patients? And a really important concept here is this provider impact. We really want to get to sustainability through figuring out what it really takes. You know, it takes 22.8 minutes for a paramedic to visit a diabetic patient in their home, and we can start to build a real cost model around that and see what the outcomes are. What's the support structure needed? Do we need additional mental health providers? Is a paramedic the wrong level of care for this? Should it really be a nurse? Should it really be a social worker? We're going to find that out through this grant. And then really identify all the other gaps. What is it that we can't do? And why is it? Is it a matter of money? Is it a matter of expertise? Do those resources not exist in our community? And really come out of this with a true picture of what this service is. And then we have a real good case to turn around to all of the partners in the community and say, is this something that we want to continue to do together? Whether that's through dollars, whether that's through in-kind resources, whatever that may be. But this really gives us the true data that we've never really had. I think that we are planning on, if you approve this grant, we can start the hiring process, which we hope will be done by June 1st. We're going to use June as a training month, and we hope to start delivering services July 1st. That's our goal at this point. And then I think what we really need to do from there is get the word out. And one of the other Health Network task forces is an outreach and education task force that Karen Roney is actually chair of, and I think one of the things they're going to help us with is really start to get the word out and start having a discussion with our community about healthcare and about what that means and about what this grant means and about what all this work that the network partners have put into this. I think that's about it. That's my bullet point version of what we're trying to do. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I go, wow, what a great opportunity for our city. I mean, this looks like, to me, a no-brainer. I'm just excited to have this opportunity. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree. I have one question. What happens when this grant runs out? What happens in year 3?
Well, so the grant is funded for two years, so the employees have no expectations of continuing. So the worst case scenario is that it just stops, and that's certainly not what we want. Through this whole process, we're really trying to get to sustainability, and really what that looks like, we're not really sure, but we're going to try to find out as we go and see where the true value points are and who those are valuable to, so we can start to engage in that sustainability conversation really early on.
Because and I appreciate that, because we have this discussion in budget years. We get a grant, and then we try to fold it into the budget process once the grant runs out.
Right.
Because we're talking a vehicle, personnel, operation and maintenance of a vehicle. I like this, but I'm concerned that we're going to be providing services, and then all of a sudden year 3 comes around. Is there potential to go back after this grant after year 2? Is that a potential?
It is. It's certainly a potential. That's not unknown to the Colorado Health Foundation, especially if we find along the way that something's very different.
Okay.
But I think the other key point there is this is not a city project. This is a big partner project.
Yeah, and I get that. It's a network project, but, I mean, it's coming through the city. We're getting a check. If you look at the paperwork, the check's being cut to the city.
Right.
But, I mean, if for some reason the funding stops, are the other partners willing to help try to fund this after year 2?
Well, that's certainly what we're trying to find out through this process, is really exactly what it means, what the costs are, and what the value is, so we can have a really meaningful conversation with the partners rather than just on a concept.
I think part of the question is we've had discussions. I've been part of some of the discussions with providers, and we talk conceptually about this. One of the things that we're looking at is there's definitely a higher level of expense associated with the types of patients that they want to target. Part of the problem that we have in those conversations is that it's hard to really quantify that without going through a beta test. Right. So we can actually show groups like clinics and hospitals and so on and so forth what the return looks like to them. And I think showing that return is going to be a significant piece of creating the sustainable component to this. And we've had very good conversations. I had some very good conversations with LUH and representatives from that group. At the end of the day, it's like, how do you put the numbers together? And I think what this grant does is gives us the ability to put those numbers together. But I will tell you that was one of the conversations that we had internally is there are no expectations that this moves forward after the grant runs out. And so when we go out and market those positions, essentially it's going to be 2-year positions. I mean, you're going to know up front in terms of what this is going to look like. Because we don't want to give anyone the impression that this is something that can continue beyond the grant funding.
Okay, well, I as the mayor stated, I have high hopes for this, and hopefully that the partner, for some reason, if the funding after year 2, if the grant's not, if we're not eligible to renew, that the partners see some, hopefully the data comes back and it's shown that it is valuable and it is useful, the partners will step up as we will, try to help out as best as we can, that maybe perhaps we can try to keep this going as a partner, not as the lead, but as a partner.
Yeah, your point is well taken, and we'll have that conversation throughout the duration of the grant for sure.
Councilman Christensen.
I applaud you too. I think this is a growing need in the community, and as you know, many times if you just do a home visit, you can see problems that the doctor couldn't have pictured, and the problems become quite clear, and the patient doesn't even realize what some of the problems are. And so I hope we'll approve this because I think it's just a growing need in the community. Thank you.
Councilman Riley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'm going to be voting for this. I echo the sentiments of my fellow council members. My only question, not really a concern, what would our firefighters say? My question is this going to be going to normal EMTs, or is this going to be worked with our firefighters, who my understanding is they're all EMTs? And so based on that, what does the union say? What do our city employees say? They like, cool, great, more work, no more work. I just wonder what they'd say.
So we've had discussions. In fact, before this grant was approved, our plan originally was to utilize on-duty fire services people to do the level 1 care. So these new paramedics will be civilian; they won't be firefighters. Okay. But we've been talking with certainly in public safety about one of the long-term goals we'd like to get is the on-duty resources are actually doing all the level 1 stuff. Okay. So they're doing all that kind of basic care, and then if there's a problem, they refer to the level 2.
Gotcha. I think one of the things that I've heard in conversations with folks from the fire department is similar to the conversation we're having with the hospital and the clinic. It's the unknown, and it's the concern of stretching the resources when they have call volume. And I think, again, because these are civilian positions and it's not going to be on-duty personnel providing this work, it really lets us look at how much work is involved in the process. What does this mean? Where we can have a more focused conversation versus making a lot of assumptions.
So what I'm hearing is that our first responders won't be participating in the grant, but will be hiring new civilians and then using that information for future decisions.
More detailed conversation that they will be part of.
Fair enough. Thank you. Then I move. What's this ordinance? Here it is. Sorry, resolution. Then I move item 9H, that we approve and authorize the mayor to sign a Longmont Community Health Network grant.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Before we vote, Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I think might be important, hearing the rest of the comments, is to somehow keep a tab on the avoidance cost by having these civilian paramedics to, you had presented in previous council items that a lot of times our service calls are for some of these maybe routine things that come up. Somebody has a contradictory, pharmacological problem with new medication, and then so I want to know whether or not there's a way you're going to track the avoidance that this is mitigating, that call that may not have been the call that the fire department would want to go on, but this is. I'd like to see, whether or not the numbers in this column go down on these type of calls when we have this grant period of time with these civilian paramedics. Are you looking at tracking those and comparing, how many calls we get and how many can we guess from year to year what might have been avoided due to this other work and funding? I know it's hard to prove something that didn't happen.
Right.
But you must know from previous presentations, you presented some figures on the calls and the nature of the calls.
We can. So there's a couple different answers to that question. One is, if they're patients that we know their history. So it's easy then to say, they visited the ER 6 times in the last 2 years, pre-intervention, post-intervention, there's only 2. But I think on the broader scale, we have some, kind of best practices metrics that we can apply that have been proven throughout the country. It'll be hard to come to an exact number, but I think that's a roundabout answer to yes, we're certainly going to collect as much data as we can through this, because I think that's a key sustainability thing, is if we can go back to the partners in the community and say, here's an impact, I think that's a very important thing for us to do.
And to Councilmember Santos's point, if in a follow-up year where there's no grant funding, the partners are coming together to sustain the work, and your department may come with a request from the general fund to be budgeted XYZ dollars. Mm-hmm. If you have those numbers to say, this is how much money we were spending, we're asking actually for less money, or give us a figure for what those types of calls were being covered anyway. That would be very relevant to making decisions in future budget years. So I'd appreciate, it seems like you're thinking that way, but keeping tabs on the numbers is always important.
If I can also add, I think as we move to budget prioritization, that's going to be a component of that process that requires that type of information, so those projects can be weighted. So that is part of the system that we're going to bring in.
All right, no further questions. We've got a motion. It's been seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is general business 11A, traffic safety fund presentation, and Sean Lewis will introduce this item.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Last summer, some of you may recall that Bicycle Longmont made a proposal to City Council to establish a surcharge on moving violations. It would be a revenue source, at that time a revenue source for a new pedestrian and bicycle safety fund. The purpose at that time that was laid out was to provide funding for traffic safety-related expenses associated with on-road special events, capital projects to improve bicycle pedestrian safety, as well as biking, walking, safety education programs. At that time, you gave Bicycle Longmont, as well as city staff, direction, first, that you thought that there was some merit to the proposal, but you had some concerns and asked that they take a few things out and make some modifications, those including removing the special event support from the proposal, expanding the focus of the proposal beyond bicycle and pedestrian safety, and then creating a stronger link between the proposed surcharge and the use of the revenue source. And finally, to seek input from the the Transportation Advisory Board. So tonight, I'll introduce Ryan Kriegerud. He's the president of Bicycle Longmont. They have, I believe, fulfilled most of these requests, and he'll kind of walk you through some of the things that they've done in the work and the changes that have been made to the proposal, and just direct your attention to the council options that we'll be asking for at the end. First, that you provide direction to city staff to work with Bicycle Longmont some more, to develop the ordinance that would actually establish the fund. 2, provide direction to modify the proposal. Or 3, don't approve the traffic safety fund and take no further action. With that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
So how do I get this up there from my iPad? I see an Apple TV called Family Room. I'm guessing this is probably not the Family Room. Okay. Is that it hooked up to your VHF feed?
Yeah, I'm going to see the video, Mike.
Okay. Thank you very much. I apologize.
We need to get on the 5G. Once you get on the right wireless then.
Councilmember Moore.
Who's here?
Waiting for you. Seated. Waiting for you. Seated.
Okay, go ahead. Continue. All right.
All right, let's try this again. Okay, thank you very much for your indulgence as you got the technology working and so forth. My name is Ryan Craigwood. I am president of Bicycle Longmont. I also live in, as I like to say, beautiful Old Town at 615 Lincoln Street. So I want to thank council for scheduling us tonight and for Bicycle Longmont to be here to present it and so forth. So what I'm presenting this evening, and Sean did a great job of introducing it, is the Traffic Safety Fund. We did bring this to City Council in June, and as Sean said, you gave us some marching orders to change the proposal, go visit with Transportation Advisory Board, and then schedule another meeting with you all to go through the changed proposal and so forth. So, with that, I'll get the slideshow underway, and I'll keep my comments brief so that we can have some discussion on this, and you can get out of here at a normal hour, whatever that happens to be these days. All right, so the Traffic Safety Fund. The original proposal that we came to council with in June was to create a $10 surcharge on moving violations to cover event costs related to safety. This was removed in June, as Sean was mentioning. After council discussed it for that evening, they said that this was something that was not palatable, and so we agreed to remove it out of the proposal. We also proposed covering capital projects to connect and enhance on-street bike and pedestrian networks. This was removed by staff recommendation, and also the Transportation Advisory Board recommended removing this from the proposal as well, mainly because the number of tickets and the total amount being raised by the surcharge that's estimated to be about $18,000. When you're talking about concrete and doing paths and so forth, it does not go very far. So staff basically said that should probably come out if you want this thing to move forward, and so actually the Transportation Advisory Board said that, and so then they recommended us removing that. So that was taken out in October. Then we worked with providing funding for educational programs, and that's where we stand this evening. Our proposal is essentially to provide traffic safety education in Longmont, and that's for all road users. It's not just for bicyclists, it's not just for pedestrians, it's for everybody. And I'm going to go through a few of these examples of what that fund could be used for, and then the question that's come up time and again is this fund really needed? Is it something that the city should create something brand new, and so forth? And we believe at Bicycle Longmont that the answer is yes, and I'll walk you through that. So, the Traffic Safety Fund. The problem, so recent city planning processes and city surveys that have gone out with for instance, the Parks Master Plan, for instance, they had a really great survey that they sent out, and they had an incredible inclusive process of getting input into that planning process. One of the things that came out of it was, one of the questions had to do with barriers, and what do people find a barrier to visiting city facilities and visiting city parks and so forth. And one of those was, if I'm going to go out on the street in something other than my car, I don't feel safe getting to a park. And so they see that as a barrier. This question was then echoed to the youth in a different question, and the youth had this similar answer. It was in their top three that they didn't feel safe getting to a park in order to be there. The number one item within the youth question was they weren't allowed to be at a park without an adult. So that speaks to safety as well. And I don't know if we can answer that question and what all that means with the Traffic Safety Fund, but the Parks Master Plan process and their public involvement process basically touched on some of these safety needs that we've been hearing about in the community. So one of the other things, low compliance with the downtown dismount zone. I think if you've all been downtown, had a cup of coffee, you've probably seen one or two people on bikes going right over the new markings on the pavement, and then the medallions that are on the light posts and so forth. One of the uses for this fund could be to fund some other types of outreach and intervention downtown and so forth. The other problem we've seen is with the flooding and so forth. Bicycle Longmont kicked off what we were hoping to be a series of public meetings. We kicked off one in October, And we had a flood town hall meeting that was really well attended by our community. We had over 75 people there, and the thing that we were hearing from folks at that time was, what's wrecked, what can't I use, when will I be able to use it, when can I exercise, how am I going to commute to work, what are some suggested routes, stuff like that. So now as we get towards spring, and finally yesterday we had a really beautiful day, we're going to see more people out there trying to figure out now how to get east-west through town without using the greenway and so forth. So one of the things we could use this fund for is to figure out how, one, to drive safely in your car if there are going to be cyclists on the road on streets that typically haven't had them before because they've been going east-west on our greenway system. Because I think everybody recognizes that the greenway has been the backbone to our community. So the solution to some of these problems we find is the Traffic Safety Fund. And the Traffic Safety Fund, the only people who pay the surcharge are the folks who are contributing to the problem. So the problem is making our streets unsafe for other road users. So whether that's, I'll admit when I was in high school, because I would never do this now, I was known to drift a few corners in my Mustang. I was known to not always stop at stop signs. So I was contributing to the problem of making my neighborhood streets less safe. And so if I would have been caught by, who was the chief in my hometown at that time? See, I was never in trouble, so I can't remember. That was Chief Costello. So if I was caught by him, I would probably gotten exhibition driving. And if it was Longmont, it would be $10 per point, which would probably be a 2-point offense, so it would be $20, and then surcharges are added on top of that. So because I'm a violator, I'd pay into this fund if I were ever to do that here in Longmont. So violators are the only ones that pay for this. Regular folks who are following the traffic laws aren't going to pay into this if they don't get a ticket. And this also affects cyclists, if cyclists run stop signs. And I think we saw in the paper a couple of weeks ago, a cyclist was busted for running a stop sign and then running away from the cop as well. And so they got in some big trouble there. So they would be paying into this surcharge as well. So what we're talking about is a $10 surcharge that are added to tickets issued as a result of a moving violation. And our estimate in 2013 was that was 1,800 tickets that would be subject to this surcharge. So that's about $18,000 that we're talking about for the Traffic Safety Fund. These funds would be used for education programs to change behavior and so forth. The administration of this would be through, what we're suggesting is through the Transportation Advisory Board. It's brought to my attention that the Transportation Advisory Board's powers may have to be reviewed in order for them to be a distributor of grant funds or something like that. So that part hasn't been entirely worked out. But what we're trying to do in terms of the concept that we're discussing this evening is to keep it high level and to keep flexibility, essentially. We could come up with rules and regulations right off the bat that would paint us all into a corner and then ultimately not have the flexibility to respond to the changing environment and so forth. Transportation Advisory Board also did something that I think is pretty smart. They said, if this is going to move forward, then let's put a 3-year sunset on the surcharge. And for 2 reasons. 1, if we don't like it, it can go away. 2, the thing I like the most about it, because in my day job, I work with a lot of data. I like to be able to research things and make sure that it's making a difference. So what they said is if it's not making a difference, it should go away. If in fact, after the 3-year period and council wants it to stay, then you can reauthorize it for another time period. So some examples, these are just examples of what the fund could be used for. For motoring, right now, distracted driving is something that's pretty hot on people's lists of things to talk about curbing distracted driving, texting while driving, and so forth. Neighborhood meetings. So the city has, I believe, 1 in 3 people in the city are in registered neighborhoods, and those city neighborhoods are eligible for block parties, or I was told to use the word meetings, but I think we call them block parties on my block. And so what we could do is go out to where people live, and this is what we found through Bike Night, is that if you have people where they live learn to ride their bikes around their neighborhood, they realize that their neighborhood isn't as scary as what they might think it is. Or helping them to link up where they live with places that they want to go and realizing that they can get there from here. Create a positive pedestrian experience downtown. This one speaks to focus on downtown as part of the focus on Longmont, where we're trying to increase the pedestrian nature of downtown, and I think the alley projects are really adding to that. One of the things with the alley projects is to get people in the alleys so that there's some liveliness to them, directing people, especially cyclists that are currently using the sidewalks, to use the alleys would be one way, and then also helping to promote the safety of the alleys and so forth. One other thing is the resident meetings for Greenway Alternatives for basically exercising where to go, what's open, where can you go, what are some 5K, what are some 10K routes throughout the city that people can use for exercising that are relatively safe and so forth. And then also how to commute to your jobs and so forth. And then, because this is a surcharge and because the funds are being derived from people who are breaking the law, there needs to be a portion of it, I think, for enforcement. And so a portion of this, and I didn't break out in percentages because I didn't want to get to that level of detail, but in all of the different programs that we looked at in Fort Collins, Evans, and then formerly in Greeley, there was an enforcement component to it to help change the behavior of what's being reported. Some of the benefits. We think that we're using this traffic safety fund for the different purposes that I just mentioned. We're going to be able to change people's behavior. We're going to be able to reduce congestion. Because honestly, if Bicycle Longmont or other active living organizations in town are doing their jobs, we're getting people out and we're being more active. That means they're not driving around. So that means all those people who are never going to do what we're trying to get people to do can get to wherever they're going faster because we have taken cars off the road. So it's kind of, you know, a chicken and egg kind of a thing. Neighborhoods will have fewer. So one of the things, if we take a look at Safe Routes to School and getting kids to get to school in alternative ways, there'll be fewer cars around schools in the morning. And one of the statistics that are out there is that 30% of peak hour traffic is parents shuttling their kids around because of school either starting or school is ending or there's an event that they need to get their kids to in those peak hours, which is really interesting. So now when I drive to my job, I go, who's shuttling stuff around? And then I go by Twin Peaks High School and I realize, there it is. So anyway, so 30% of that driver volume during the peak hours are people shuffling their kids around town. And so if we are looking at Safe Routes to School, and this might be an option to fund some of those Safe Routes to School strategies, then we're going to be able to help to lower that percentage rate. So as I mentioned, we took a look at different ordinances that are out in different communities. And the thing that we found, and one of the questions that came up and one of the encouragements from council was at the time when we presented this in June, we didn't have an ordinance or an existing program to report to you about. Over the summer, we did some research and found the Traffic Calming Fund in Fort Collins. So Fort Collins does a $35 surcharge on moving violations. They got their, they spend their money on education, capital projects, and then also on enforcement. They first put it into place in 2003, and then they reauthorized it in 2005 and made some adjustments at that time. Their program is based off of the first community that did it, which was Greeley, and Greeley had a program going from 2003 until 2010 with a $25 surcharge on moving violations that was used on capital projects, education within the community, as well as enforcement. And this Greeley project went away, or the Greeley program went away, and I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody in Greeley to talk to me about why it went away. So I'm going on an article that was in the Greeley Tribune that basically said coordination between public safety and public works was the reason why it went away. So I'm not quite sure what the actual story is. Evans has the same type of ordinance on record with a $25 surcharge on moving violations, and they also use theirs for capital projects and enforcement within Evans. The program that we're basing our recommendations off of is Fort Collins. They've got a robust program. Their purpose statement, which I think strengthens the legal requirements behind the surcharge, which is essentially, whereas the City Council believes it is reasonable and appropriate that persons who are involved in contributing to the city's traffic problems should also contribute monetarily to the solution through the imposition of a surcharge on moving violations. And that lays it out in an existing ordinance that's already on the books being enforced in another community. So so what is the solution? And so one of the synopsis would be changing behavior and lowering volumes by educating residents on how to get around Longmont safely and sometimes differently. So what we're proposing this evening is we've changed the name from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Traffic Safety Fund to simply the Traffic Safety Fund, and an opportunity to broaden it so that it can cover more modes within our network. We think that this also addresses council concern regarding the narrowed bike ped focus that we brought to you in June, and we also talked this a little bit with the Transportation Advisory Board in October. It broadens it to include motorist behavior as well. It's based on an existing ordinance in Fort Collins. We believe that measured outcomes are something that if this goes forward and there are grants given out, or that there are city programs based with this fund, that there should be measured outcomes. So for instance, I referenced the Parks Master Plan. One of the statistics that they have within there is the types of modes that are used to get to our parks and facilities. So basically it says 2/3 of trips to our parks and facilities are by people in cars, and 1/3 are by people that either walking or riding bikes or doing some other way of getting there. One of those measured outcomes could be we want to decrease the number of trips to our parks by 10% in cars and increase that through other alternatives. I think that would be a doable measurement because we're finishing up the tunnel underneath 119 leading to Sandstone Ranch, which is the #1 venue for soccer in Longmont, I think. Just judging by the times we drive by there, it seems like there's always something going on. So one of the ways that we could say a measured outcome would be by taking a look at that particular metric, or the metrics that currently are already researched in the different planning processes that the city has undertaken. It has an education focus, and then we've also utilized the Transportation Advisory, or to use the Transportation Advisory Board to review the proposals and so forth and take a look at whether that's possible. And then we reached out to Judge Vandehey, and one of the things that the municipal court does, and I think this is an excellent program that we want to see maintained, is that if somebody is not doesn't have the resources to pay their fines, that there's a hardship clause that they have at the municipal court that basically is a community service in lieu of payment. And so this, we would not require them to pay this surcharge. We would want that hardship case to continue forward. So moving forward, what we would recommend is option 1 in your council communication. And with that, I've talked, I think, long enough. And any questions that you might have?
Well, I think this is a big improvement from the first proposal you brought forward. So you did a lot of good work, and I also appreciate all the things that the Transportation Advisory Board did. Councilmember Christensen.
I think this is a wonderful proposal. I think it will enhance downtown and the trails and parks. It'll enhance independent transportation, and it'll enhance education. And I particularly encourage you to in education, pay special attention to distracted driving, which is a huge problem, and also the safe routes to school would be wonderful if kids could feel like they could take their bikes to school again, and that would be great for everybody. Thank you.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Combs. I guess a few things. First of all, great presentation. Second, I think what you do in the community is awesome. I think your organization's great. I think that your original intentions here were good. However, I also deal in this world on a regular basis, and I've got some concerns. While on its face, it sounds like a great idea, but being with clients frequently in municipal courts, I've never heard anyone ever in a citizen of any city go, "Oh, that's awesome, more fees." I used to think that, hey, part of the solution to, some of these budget shortfalls, charge a lot of money for people who break the law. But as you saw in municipal jurisdictions, there's not a lot of people. And I think that, so here are my concerns. One, I think that, for example, it would be educational programs to change behavior. My concern is that if you haven't broken the law, you don't need to have your behavior educated. You know what I mean? You don't need to be educated. And if you have broken the law and you've paid your $10 or 25 or 35 or whatever, I'm not a big believer that these type of programs change behavior. Just last week, I had a client that took traffic court or traffic classes, and those already exist. And they've got to pay a lot more than $10 to do that if they want to get a better deal with the municipal prosecutor. He took his class, was late for court because he got pulled over. So I mean, you can't. You're not forcing these people to be able to participate in any classes. And those classes, if they want to, and if the prosecutor wants to actually encourage them to take the class, those classes already exist. I'm also concerned that the Transportation Advisory Board, like all city boards, are there to advise council, giving them discretion over how to allocate these funds. And to reauthorize this, I think, would be inappropriate. Next, I also think that focusing the funds on downtown educational classes, other than painting a big symbol downtown, get off your bike. I mean, it's not against the law right now to ride your bike downtown. It's just kind of a suggestion. So I don't think that's necessary. I think my children know how. I mean, if it's a good day, my kids know how to get to the local park in their school. And even if you provided them a pamphlet saying, here are all the trails to get to from here to there, we know how to get there. It's just if it's cold, we're not going to bike. And if we've got young kids, we're not going to bike. And so I think also that, police, when they pull over my clients at least, nobody's like, hey, you sped, but let me give you a pamphlet on how to bicycle. So I think that right now, that I'm going to vote against it, because I think that what started off as a good idea of maybe using funds to increase our pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure, tanked the last meeting when we said, no, it's not a lot of money, and like you said, it's $18,000, and there's a lot of capital costs. I can see why Greeley discontinued it. So I guess what I'm saying is I think it's a valiant effort. I think that your organization, what you do here locally, is awesome. I don't want to take away from that at all, but I just think that my personal opinion is that an extra $10 on violators, it's not going to do what I think we're hoping it will do. I just don't think it would add anything other than just one more. My clients always ask, so why do I have to pay this? And we have to say, well, because somewhere along the way, a city council or a state legislature said that you had to. Well, I'm gonna vote no, so I can actually tell people, hey, I voted against that. So,
Councilmember Levinson.
Just a couple of points. Just as the Housing and Human Service Board advises the council on how to spend the money we allocate to human service organizations, my idea would be that TAB, it would be a similar system. TAB wouldn't just say, this is how we're spending the money. They would, my guess is that the idea would be to have the same kind of system we've already used with other advising boards that advise us on how to allocate funds. So I'm not incredibly disturbed about that aspect of things. I am a little bit curious about, the education, how poorly we've done about education in the dismount zone downtown. The best thing would be that those people get caught for violations and then they can pay the $10 so that other people can be educated and not to do the same thing again. So, I eventually, my understanding is that dismount zone is going to be, they're going to start to want to ticket people for that. So this could be a valuable way of spending a little extra money that we don't necessarily want to allocate out of another fund. I guess the other question I had is whether or not there is sustaining funding for Safe Routes to School. I know we apply year over year for grants, but eventually, if that grant goes away, does the city have any capacity to fund safe routes to school? And could this be something that would fund safe routes?
So with that, I believe Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Levison, I believe the funding is ending. I think Karen's still here. She's on the board at LiveWell. Have you guys had that conversation?
I think Karen Roney is going to make an appearance at the podium.
It's really fine. Thank you, Ryan, Mayor, members of the City Council. So I think what Ryan has started to say, which is correct, is that we believe that that the funding for Safe Routes to School will end in this next cycle, and LiveWell Longmont, in conjunction with the City of Longmont, did apply for funding for that last opportunity, and we should hear sometime this month whether we will get additional grant funding. But there will not be any sustainable funding, I think, beyond that, and we would have to look at how to continue to move these efforts forward.
And I guess I don't remember off the top of my head how much it costs to do Safe Routes to School. Do you know what the grant amount request was?
But I think, certainly it's been, we've had several of these grants, so it just kind of depends on what we request. But this year, this grant proposal, it was a pretty significant amount. I think it was a little over $200,000. We decided to go for the
big one.
The big one, because this is going to be our last opportunity. And if we are awarded that, we will bring that back to council for approval and more discussion.
So moving forward, it would take quite a few years to accumulate $18,000 at a time just to fund a much reduced effort in Safe Routes to School. It might just simply mean no staff member, but maybe pamphlets and volunteers that are organized.
Mayor Coombs, member of council. One of the things that Safe Routes to School does is a neighborhood checklist. And so what they do is they go out and they assess a neighborhood in the immediate vicinity around a school. And what they find are, what are the different kinds of things that need to be fixed to make approaching that school safer. Some of them are big ticket items. And so the Safe Routes to School grants are broken up into educational components as well as infrastructure pieces. When you get over $200,000, you're probably talking about doing infrastructure kinds of things. The programmatic side of it, which would be the part that this fund would fund, basically can target those low-cost, high-impact kinds of programs like perhaps signage, or I'm reluctant to say crossing guards, because one of the things I don't want to see this fund used for is hiring more people, because once you hire people, then you have an ongoing commitment to those folks, and again, maintaining flexibility for the use of the fund would mean that focusing it on a program or something like that. But Safe Routes does identify some of those high priority, low impact, or low cost programs.
I guess I have some reservations about how much impact it's going to make. However, I'm willing to vote to move it forward to further analyze what the program would be like, and to flesh out what the responsibilities the Transportation Advisory Board would have, if it would be similar to the Health and Human Services Board, as far as recommending to council proposals that they had received for funding under this fund. The other point is, though, couldn't the public safety tax also cover some components of this traffic safety and education? I know that fund is not very well funded right now, and so considering that, could this balance out the fact that we don't have enough funds in that other fund that normally we could tap into?
So I may have to ask Jim or Teresa to help, but I think one of the components of the public safety tax is that it has to be a new program. And so I think that would be a big piece of the conversation. So if it's an existing program, then we couldn't apply that. What I can say, though, what we're dealing with on the public safety tax is it's just not generating revenue that we need for public safety operations. So theoretically, if it was generating the amount of revenue we would hope, it could, but what we're seeing is that we just don't have the capacity right now in that fund.
So Ryan, the way I interpreted the education piece of this differently than Mayor Pro Tem Bagley did it. I don't think we're trying to educate the people that are violating. I mean, because that's a perhaps hard group to educate. But I think we're using this to educate, parents on safe routes for the kids to ride to school, for just general citizens. I know, like, when you guys handed out those maps, I never thought that Grant Street would be a great bicycle street for me to get, from my house to my office here. But it's a wonderful street because, you did the research, there's low traffic. I mean, it's not designated as a bike lane, but, it's that type of education that we're getting out of it that has a big benefit to the community. It's not just trying to educate the people that get moving violations. So I have a different interpretation of the educational piece. Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So I guess a couple questions I have is, any feel for what the administration costs would eat away at this fund, what the amount would be?
That I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you on that. The other funds that I referenced, my understanding is that their administrative costs are within their funds. But for us, I haven't had that conversation with city staff on this. I think what we wanted to do is bring it to city council to then get to that next level if we bring an ordinance back to you. So I can definitely follow up on that.
So to answer your questions, no, we don't have a feel in terms of what the administrative cost will be.
And is there any feel for the number of hardship cases that are moving through the system on an annual basis?
I don't have that number.
So would an extra $10 have kept you from sliding your Mustang around the corner back in the day?
Well, I can speak to a different situation. Somebody in my household got a speeding ticket for $145. And we no longer speed on Nelson between Hover and Sunset. So I'll just when we see the flower bed, we slow down.
Okay.
So there was a good sale at Hobby Lobby. So.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Councilmember Moore asked one of my questions regarding the administrative costs of staff. Because if it's only $18,000, and it's even half admin cost, and I wouldn't think it would be half, but that's $9,000 in admin costs. We're not going to do a whole lot of money with $9,000. I'm not all too thrilled about having meetings included in this because that's an event. So that's a no for me. I pulled up the Fort Collins ordinance. Said surcharge shall be assessed at the time of disposition by the municipal court and shall be dedicated by the finance department exclusively spent for traffic calming expenditures, including but not limited to training, education, signage, facilities, public education, and additional traffic enforcement, police officers, and equipment. What type of public education does Fort Collins offer?
Good question. Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Santos. So the city of Fort Collins offers, they offer your typical information. They do posters for the correct way to ride your bike down the street. They have this Don't Be a Fish, which is the riding your bike against traffic, is like swimming upstream, so they say don't be a fish, stuff like that. But they also have a relationship with the Colorado Eagles, and one of the hockey players, they do PSA announcements on local radio stations that is funded out of this surcharge in their community. They have a method where a Safe Routes to School group can say that we want to put in radar stands, those stands that basically tell you how fast you're going and whether you're speeding and so forth. And so if one of those requests comes to Joe Olson, who's their transportation engineer, then he has the authority to authorize whether or not that goes in, after they do a study to make sure that it's going into a safe location. So their educational programming is everything from public outreach in terms of posters and printed materials to providing classes, as well as PSA announcements on the local radio station. Now, granted, they're dealing with about $330,000 a year, and so those kinds of things are more affordable. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And that I could see doing, but granting out money for groups to do education, those are events. And that's what I was against in the very beginning. Because that's not what I see this being used for. I have no problem with helping provide money to Safe Routes to School. $200,000 is a lot of money that we'll try to overcome. Looking at the Safe Routes to School website, whether the president just proposed his budget. I don't know where that is and whether or not Congress is actually going to pass the budget. That's who knows what's going to happen in Congress. But there's a lot of still unknowns. I would like to see more detail about what specific programs are being proposed before I guess I say yes. You and I had coffee this morning. Whether it's a staff member, I mentioned the lodger's tax. We had one individual that actually approved the grants and wrote that out. Whether it's TAB that sees the Transportation Advisory Board that sees these applications and gives its blessing and said, yes, that's a great application for X group to get X amount of dollars. It still has to go through a staff member to write up, look at the grant, say yes, give it to finance. Finance does what it needs to do and disperses the cash. I mean, there's still staff time and admin costs to that. Or if it's, bypass TAB, Councilmember Bagley brings up a good point, but I don't see TAB reauthorizing this. It definitely would have to come to council. I don't think this is. I still don't think it's ready for prime time. I think it might be close, but there's still. It's the Transportation Safety Fund. It's still bike heavy, very bike heavy. But coming from Bicycle Longmont, I would expect that. Again, I'm not sure.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I really admire your tenacity to take an idea and work it and work it and work it and try to get it to come to fruition. I really do admire that. I have some of the same questions. Usually when we raise a fee or something, here's our fee, here's what it goes for. We raise the electric rate, here's what we get for it. Here's what we have to build with it. I'm still not making the connection very well with this $10 fee, although I will never have to pay it because I don't have moving violations. Some in my family may at some point, but the $10 fee doesn't bother me. It just, for violators, I'm just not sure exactly what it goes for. And I have the same question as the cost to administer the program, and then who would do this education? Who is the group or the entity that does the safety education? I'm not sure. Can you tell me?
So Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Finley, I don't think there's a specific group, one specific group that does this. I think there are a number of us in the community that have some of our fingers in the safety room, in the safety pots, which are Live Well Longmont. They're the ones that are implementing Safe Routes to School. We do bike education and that sort of thing. And then the police department has their classes for the folks who want to get their points reduced, point infraction reduced from their infractions and so forth. So in this, I would imagine kind of like what Councilmember Levinson was bringing up in the Health and Human Services pool. There are guidelines that are written up, and people have to meet those, and only the best grants would actually survive that process. And so nothing would say that all the funds would have to be given out. If not, if they don't get any good grants or anything like that, then they would not be, the funds would not be distributed, or those kinds of things. So,
you know, I'm really not opposed to moving this forward and looking into it. You know, having staff and Bicycle Longmont get together and see, you know, some concrete things that have some concrete numbers to it, and let's take a look at it. I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. I think there are some good ideas in there. Is there a kids' bike safety program where they learn how to ride a bike when they're little?
yeah, we've worked with the YMCA to do that. One of the things that we were hoping to do this year with our Kids Holiday Bike program was to have an area of, we did it in Sears this year, was have an area with bikes that didn't have pedals, so kids can learn to balance.
Grandson has one of those.
Yeah, they learn to balance first, and then that's the hardest part of riding a bike. It's not your feet moving, unless you're clipped in, of course. Then, you know, then you get to see some funny stuff at stop signs. But
I'm not
we're trying to
talented
get
enough for that. I would have to have lessons for that.
Yeah, there you go. I recommend starting on grass. So with that, though, the YMCA and Bike Longmont, we've done some bike rodeos with them. We did a few with, we did one with Salud last summer, and part of the Safe Routes to School piece is to do the bike education piece with the different schools. And one of the things that I hope separates this year's grant request from other grants that are going into the Safe Routes to School pot this year is we want to take our model of bike night and bring that out to neighborhoods. So the one thing that we found with bike night is every Wednesday I take the kids aside for 10 minutes and we just go over bike safety. And that's all we do. And we talk about how to ride your bike in a group, and we talk about how to get from your house to different places. So to answer your question, Safe Routes to School, Live Well Longmont's a major funder of classes. Buzz Feldman operates his own bike classes, and then Lauren Greenfield works as the Safe Routes to School coordinator, helping out with that. YMCA's offered some things. Bike Longmont's donated bikes to the Aspen Center for Child Development, and they've got Strider bikes that Cindy tells me their students have gone on to go directly to bikes and not have to do training wheels. So there's a lot of grassroots effort out there.
Okay. I guess I would move that we provide staff direction to work with Bicycle Longmont to develop an ordinance for us to look at. I'm not saying I'll vote for it once I see it, but I need some more, here's the money, here's where it goes to kind of numbers, you know. I need a direct link, at least more of one than I'm seeing right now. Second.
You know, one thing that I was just thinking, you know, this is a pilot program, so if it's not perfect, and it's a flexible program, and, you know, we'll get the data. If it's not working, once it's implemented, it's easy for us to kill, because it would sunset. But if it is working, it's a great program. And I can't imagine how the administration of it is that hard. I mean, it's collecting 1,800 times 10 into a pot, which is going to be pretty easy to calculate where that money came from, because we know how many moving violations, we know what the charge is, we know where the money went. Then when it comes time to distribute it out, I mean, how could it possibly cost, you know, $9,000 to administer this program? I just can't, yeah, okay. But I just think it's not, the administrative part, I don't think it's going to be, I can't imagine it being that hard. Can you comment on that, Harold?
I think it's hard to say, and I think it depends on the process that you're going to use to disperse the funds. And so if it's a involved process, it could take a lot of staff time. So I think part of the reason we can't say this is what it looks like is because where the funds are going to go, what does that process look like? Those are
So what is it, obviously, if it's 50% administrative cost, this would kill the program, so we've got to figure out
Right, and
how to
I
do
think,
it
again,
efficiently.
it's knowing specifics so we can actually take those specifics
Okay.
and really understand what that administrative cost is going to look like.
Right.
And I think that's
okay.
To tap into what Councilmember Finley's saying, at least as I've been briefed on this, that's one of the struggles is what is this really going to be so we can work the numbers.
Okay.
Councilmember Bailey. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I think everyone's had a chance to speak.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, make an observation, that we're a government body that has received an idea that, oh my gosh, we can get a little money off this. And we have no idea what we're going to spend it on. But what we're going to do is we're going to devote staff resources to look into this for $18,000 a year, and there's an opportunity cost. Just throw it out there. Other ways that I would prefer our city staff to currently be spending their time. Oil and gas lawsuits, RTD, the rebuilding of our greenways, bike paths, rebuilding, the mall, Butterball, redoing the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. I think this is, hats off, but usually I think good government is we have a need here. We have no data whatsoever as to what needs we have for getting people to school, if in fact this is a program, pilot or otherwise, that would include that. We have no data whatsoever other than just an idea, hey, let's charge 1,800 people $10 a year and do something with that money. And in the meantime, we're going to be expecting our staff to come up with an ordinance or ideas on how to spend that money, and then it's only $18,000 a year. We're dealing with lawsuits in the millions and malls. We have other things to do other than figure out. If we really want to use the money, the real question should be, well, once we have $18,000, what should we do with it? Let's put kids in preschool. It's better spent that way. Let's don't figure out how to get them there. Let's pay so they can actually go there. I just think it's silly to be wasting staff time and resources on this when there's actually real issues to be talking about. So we'll do what we want. But I'm 1 of 7. I applaud. I will get on my specialized S-Works, and I will join you. And I love the bicycling, but I just think this is silly to spend this much time on when we haven't identified a need and we have no data.
Councilmember Nelson.
I think that Ryan has tried to do all the legwork. Having been a former staff member of the city of Longmont, I think that he has been the one to do the heavy lifting and explore it, and I don't think you've overtaxed, or overused and abused city staff. And but to this point, if you want to do the cost analysis, maybe we should see how much it costs per word for our council packet too to be generated. See what we can do there. I also think that part of it, my idea to vote yes on this is that maybe you can develop the ordinance using everything, because I know, for example, a lot of people, there are other ways to draft legislation other than staff drafting it. So to be efficient with staff time, you can bring that and submit it and let people tweak it. My estimation also is that to vote yes on this also means that it's not going to come back directly to us, that it'll first go to TAB and let them take a look at what an ordinance looks like, because they advise us on all the other traffic-related ordinances. And again, perhaps be efficient and not have staff do the presentation. You could do the presentation. You've done a great job doing it tonight. And, see where it goes. And that's, make Councilmember Bagley happy. Don't use staff. So, yeah, that would make you happy, and that's our purpose in life right now. So, anyway, I will vote yes on this and keep it moving. And again, when you're talking about meetings going out to the neighborhoods, it would simply be like when the neighborhoods get their activity fund money and they have the neighborhood picnic. It's not funding the neighborhood picnic. That's already been funded by John Clark. And, you know, they get their money to buy their hot dogs and hamburgers and chips, but having pamphlets printed up or something that might pertain to that neighborhood to get feedback is what the idea that when you're mentioned going out to the neighborhoods, what that actually means, not sponsoring the meeting and paying for it. Okay, great, thanks.
Councilman Santos. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'll move it along. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to vote for it, but I'll move it along. If you put a poll in this, you might get someone else to vote for it, but you got to be very specific. So, you know, had that been in there, you might get him, but you know, you have to be, you know, apparently everyone has their niches. So,
a very large bike wash.
Apparently.
Okay.
But it'd have to be, you know, Olympic size.
Okay, we've got a motion, it's been seconded, let's vote. All right, it passes 6-1 with Councilmember Dagley descending.
Thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Mayor Coombs, the next item is your 2014 Council Retreat Agenda and Logistics, and Sandra Cedar will present this.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I'm here to talk about your retreat, which is going to happen in just a little bit of time. You may remember that we have divided the retreat into 2 days, one which is going to be coming up on March 21st, which is a Friday, and then the other one in June 27th. This first one, March 21st, was intended to be team building, communication, you know, just really kind of touch base with the council, and then the one on June 27th will be dedicated to budget prioritization, where you'll actually get to see the work of the Budget Prioritization Committee and all of the different services and be able to look at some of the tools that the city will have implemented financially at that point. So today what I'd like to do is ask where you'd like to have the retreat. We've given you a couple different options. And then also just to confirm that the agenda is what you're looking for. So,
option A. So can we all kind of agree on option A? Okay, let's vote. How many people want option A? All right. All right, it's fine.
Okay, we're headed to the Callahan House then, it sounds like. And what we will do is we'll be doing most of our work upstairs in the Callahan House. We'll be coming downstairs for lunches and snacks, and then our proposal is that we take a walk to downtown Longmont for dinner. So we'll be, that's the way we will proceed. There has been certainly some conversation about City Council bringing spouses for that dinner. You are certainly welcome to do so if you choose to. I would just make that decision now so that everyone knows which way you're going to roll with that. The staff directors are invited, and I think there was a conversation about council spouses specifically, so it's up to y'all.
Yeah. Councilmember Dagley,
Why not families? What about that?
No kids. Mayor Coombs, members of council, whatever you'd like to do. It's really your direction.
I think spouses and kids would be cool, you know, because I'm going to be leaving as fast as I can if my kids can't come. But if they're there, they can send me, I mean, I want your kids there. You have good kids. And I could, I know that, so Councilmember Christensen has kids, a kid. Councilmember Santos has kids. Councilmember Finley has a sister. You know, I've got kids. He's got, and Councilmember Moore can bring his cat.
I have 2 kids that I have to fly in from Las Vegas and Washington, D.C.
I'm all for that. Contingency funds. $18,000 out of the, no, just kidding.
I don't think we can have the cat.
I'd like to see kids, but I'm not going to make a motion.
I'm fine with kids. We're just talking about the dinner. I'm not going to be at the whole retreat.
No, just the dinner. Yeah. Okay, so.
Well, should we? Yeah, I'm willing to pay for my children. So.
Okay.
So, I believe the directors should at least be able to bring their spouses as well if they would so choose. And their families. So,
We have big picnics.
I mean, here's the deal. I mean, it's not very often. Not to, for some of us who've been on council for a little while, it's always very odd. We had dinner with each other this evening, and we had an executive session. And not that I don't like sitting with the other six and the other people that were in the executive session, but I mean, it's not very often that we get to sit with each other and at least try to enjoy each other's company. And we do take out, a lot of our, time away from our families. And I get it. I understand where Councilmember Bagley's going, and the directors do as well. You spend time away from your families and your significant others. So, I have no problem saying, please, bring your spouse or your significant other, and if you have your children, and not get the cat. So, I think it's at least reasonable, at least once. We do an all-employee picnic, but not all of us are able to go at all at the same time. So, just a thought.
I guess we'd want to make sure that we could find a place that would hold all these 800 people that we're talking about bringing.
Yeah, that's right.
Mayor, members of council, we could have dinner in Lyons if you chose to. We would make sure that we would have plenty of space. I do just want to clarify that on the staff side, that we certainly appreciate the invitations, and just want to clarify that you're not mandating for the families to come, right?
No.
Bring those little grubs.
That's right. Just my own personal trauma, maybe.
Well, I'm quite sure that my 27-year-old son would rather be any place else but with us for supper. No offense, but I would love to see everybody else's kids and spouses. I think it would be really fun, and it sort of fulfills the whole point of a council retreat where we get to actually know each other spouses a little bit, like we did at Christmas time. It was fun.
Councilmember Wilson?
So, when we raised our hands for option A, was that for both of the council places? Could we do council days, retreat days? Could we do the one in March at the Callahan House and then do the one in June at Blackberry Inn?
Mayor and members of council, yes. I mean, we have not checked the June date for availability for those two, but assuming that would work, you're absolutely any way that you'd like. The earlier the direction. Yeah, I would think. I mean, we do have both of these reserved right now for the March date. So if you chose Callahan House now, you're right, it would be less available as we get into wedding season. And so if you would like to make that motion now or have that conversation now, we could certainly do that.
Well, I'd like to try to go the second one in June to Lyons. And I don't know if other council members would be wanting to do that at June 27th. So
I don't mind going to Florence. I just don't want to eat it. Fabulous taste. Not that I don't like the food, but there's no chaos.
We can ask them. No, we can ask them to do a vegan option. Well, we can find an alternative smoking days too.
And we can stay at the Blackberry Inn as well. They're welcome. Yeah, they're willing and eager to have business. So okay, so what I'm hearing is Callahan House and someplace local in Longmont for March 21st. And up in Lyons, starting at Blackberry Inn and going someplace that has kale on June 27th, right? Yeah. Right. Okay, great. So let me just talk about the agenda really quick. We thought we would start out your agenda. Your packet's going to be very small because it really is just going to have the city's accomplishments in it and this agenda, which is good because really it's about conversation and learning around personality types and strengths, weaknesses, and talents and skills. We're going to bring in Dr. Riley Harville to kind of talk through that with you. If you approve this agenda today, then he is ready to send you assessments, which is an advanced DISC assessment and a style of influence, which really talks a little bit about your own communication styles and your own leadership styles and how those can work together to create a tighter council. So if you approve this agenda, that's really what the focus of it will be. We'll start off with some city trivia based on the accomplishments, so if you choose to read them well. And we'll have some flood trivia as part of that as well. And then move on to the DISC and style of influence training from Dr. Harville. And we would ask for Harold's leadership team to also take those assessments if they haven't already to be part of that conversation if you so choose. We'll follow that with a flood recovery update just to make sure that everyone knows where we are at this point in our recovery, and then talk about the vision discussion. So you may remember the last retreat in April, we started in this conversation and then have continued it. After the election, we brought in Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Christensen into the conversation. You all created a vision and a description of that vision for us to kind of take forward. What we have been doing in the meantime, we started talking about desired outcomes of government and what that looks like in order to prepare for the budget prioritization process. Next week, we're going to take a vetted version of the desired outcomes to the community to find out what's missing and what's not. I want to be clear that we are not in any way changing the vision statements, the description statements that the council suggested, as that was the direction of the council at the time. But those desired outcomes really trying to get some community input. So we're going to have boards and commissions next week, economic partners, members of the school board and school district, as well as our health and human service partner agencies to attend a meeting on March 10th at the senior center to really just see. We've defined it. We've taken those desired outcomes, and remember you all did individual definitions. We've pulled those together. We've worked on a committee to try to create one seamless description set for these desired outcomes of government, and we're going to vet that with the community and put that out in surveys and do some work with city staff. We'll be bringing that information back to you on the 21st so that you have kind of a sneak peek before we bring it to council on the 25th for approval. So it really is taking a look at where your vision and your desired outcome conversations, what input from the community around things that may be missing for you to consider. And then we would go and eat.
The recovery update is going to be important too, because for all intents and purposes, that is our work plan in terms of what we're doing and the process we're going through. And so that's why we really wanted to allocate some time to go through that with you all. I said this in one of the public meetings the other night, and I'll say it again. The staff that are working on all of these issues, whether it be individual assistants or the infrastructure components, they're moving as fast today as they did in October, still moving through all these processes. So we really want to spend some time and go over that.
All right, thank you. I think you have a great plan.
Great. I look forward to it. It will be fun. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
We'll bring you in, Mayor.
We'll challenge smoking.
Next, it's time for, I like smoking days. I don't want anybody to get their own impression that that's a great restaurant.
Seahawks.
Next is time for Final Call Public Invited to be heard. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak at Final Call Public Invited to be heard at this time? Seeing no one, I'll close Final Call Public Invited to be heard. So now it's time for Mayor and Council comments. Councilmember Fennell.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'm going to make my business of the week the Habitat for Humanity Restore. They take recycled construction items and sell them, and the profits they get from that they use for that purpose to help build safe, affordable homes. This week, they have red tags that have big discounts on things because they're going to be closing for a week or two for some remodeling. So it's a great time if you've got a little spring project now that the weather's a little nicer that you want to do. You might go down there and see what they've got to offer. The Habitat for Humanity Restore is at 1351 Sherman Drive, Ken Pratt and east of the railroad tracks.
Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended a meeting of the Colorado Municipal League Executive Board last Friday, and one of the items that we took up as a board and took a position on was an issue that was brought by both the City of Denver and the City of Fort Collins for consideration. You may have seen in the CML newsletter of February 7th, they had a little article about strengthening rules for trains hauling explosive fuels, and Senator Udall had made a statement to the Department of Transportation about looking at updating train safety regulations. I think Sandy included this information in the email she sent with the state legislative item we discussed a bit earlier. But I know that it's a pretty short time. I'm not asking that we bring a resolution right now, but I wanted to let you be aware that the board did pass a resolution that supported retrofitting rail tank cars, and also for railroads to provide emergency responders with accurate real-time information about what's being transported on the trains, especially regarding hazardous materials. Currently, the rulemaking is going on right now, and the Village of Barrington, Illinois, and Illinois Track Coalition have weighed in on this and are making some additional recommendations to the National Traffic Safety Board. Currently, railroads are not required to have their main dispatch office actually have a manifest of what is on a train. So, for example, if a train picks up additional cars in Grand Junction or Pueblo, if it's coming to Denver, the main dispatch office does not know what the contents of those next cars that are being picked up. So if there is an accident or derailment, and the papers go up in flames, literally, or they can't be gotten to by first responders quickly, they have no idea what to do when they're responding to the emergency. So one of the suggestions is that the resolution addressed, and also the resolution that was included from the City of Fort Collins, would be to simply ask that the main dispatch office have a copy of the papers when things are added or deleted from trains, just so that there is a reliable source of information they can get at quickly for first responders as a public safety issue. So I'm just asking, since we're going to Washington to talk to people, and there will be also a transportation steering committee meeting, that these items will be discussed, and a support position being asked from National League of Cities if we could consider supporting this effort to get that information for first responders, and also give support to the CML effort to look at the retrofitting of these older tanker cars and supporting safety of safely transporting hazardous materials. So I'd just like people to see if we can have a little discussion and take a position, perhaps.
Okay. Should we do that before, or did you want to weigh in first, Jeff, on Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Cruz. I just wanted to report back to council a short summary of what happened last week at the end of Thursday, Friday last week. I went to Washington, D.C. with US 36 MCC, CDOT, RTD, US 36 Community Solutions to attend meetings with funding agencies, our legislative contingency there, to talk about some transportation issues and what we're facing here in Colorado for funding opportunities, and what we see as some of the needs coming up in the future, basically lobbying for some money. That group has been very successful over the years to be getting funding for that US 36 corridor. They just closed on their TIFIA loan like the week before we went to that Washington, D.C. trip. With all the hullabaloo around that, there was quite a bit of discussion about communicate early, often, and over-communicate with your contingency. After that, blew up with all the misinformation, everything around that. So just something, it's kind of a lessons learned for not only that group, but I think as a council, we can take those takeaways as well for some of the things we need to do. So some of the big things, there's really about 3 or 4 big things that were talked about. One of them was reauthorization of the highway funding bill. That's the trust funds, basically, about how we're going to manage to continue to support our infrastructure on declining funding. And the position taken there was that we would be interested in at least funding it at the level it was funded at in the previous reauthorization. There were several transit committees, highway and rail, were the 2 highway, rail, and banking committee, actually the committees we met with, to try to get a feel for what legislation was coming up and what would be available for funding in the future. Another big one was rail crossing and the rulemaking around train horn and the quiet zones. There's no funding for it. It's a federal mandate. They're considering reopening the rule this spring, and at which time there could be some modifications to that train horn application moving forward. There's nothing certain on that, obviously, but there have been significant reductions in intersection collisions with automobiles based on what they've seen since they implemented those new rules. So Sarah's going to be putting up with some noise for a while until we get funding for managed crossings, which there is no money for at the federal level. We met also with staff people for the flood recovery issues, and one of the takeaways there was they want us to come up with a series of what projects were being worked on, what issues we're facing with dealing with federal agencies, as well as some stories to talk about what things went right, what things didn't go so well. So I think that Phil Greenwald is going to get with Sandy to put that together and get that over to them, so that we be a consolidated effort from the whole 20-some of us that were there. And all in all, it was a really good experience. We had 18 meetings, as I said, and if you haven't walked back and forth across the Capitol 18 times, you can't even imagine how far that really is.
You have new shoes.
I do. I had to buy new shoes, yeah. One of the specific things that Senator Bennett asked me to bring back to council and to the city was a position on immigration reform, if we can come up with something that would be supporting or not supporting that, and get that back to his office as an aside, as something different than the transportation issue. So he's trying to get some traction on that. So, okay. Whether or not council does anything with that, that's just a request. So.
Councilman Lavalley. Hey, Mayor Combs. I guess I do enough talking during council meetings. I rarely make comments at the end, believe it or not. But I do want to address Senate Bill 93. My personal opinion is that I think we should actually instruct staff to tell them that it's a bad idea. And the reason is, it has nothing to do with fracking. It has nothing to do with oil and gas. I think philosophically, it's actually, let me just share a brief story. I was standing in line at McDonald's this week, and Brad Jolly came up to me. I was tired. It had been a long day, and Brad Jolly wanted to talk to me about 2 issues. First, why did we use contingency funds for the women's clinic? And 2, what were we thinking using eminent domain powers for the mall? And I was a little annoyed, like I said, I was there with my kids, but that's part of the territory. As an elected official, constituents should be able to come up and confront us and hold us accountable for our votes and where we stand on things. They should be able to engage us and ask us questions and challenge us. And regardless of what you think about eminent domain, the ultimate check and balance in the system is November, once every 4 years or once every 2 years with the mayor. Brad Jolly can look at my name on a ballot box and say, I think you did it wrong, and check somebody else's name. And I think that is a crucial part of our system of government. And I think that it's a bad idea. I mean, eminent domain on the mall, we all saw how messy that was, right or wrong. And I think that when the government does it, it should be, it should be done and used cautiously. And there are repercussions, not only the voting booth, but with the court system, and taking away one of those checks and balances so that a private entity can take other people's property, I think it's just a bad idea. And ironically, I think that Republicans, and I love Ayn Rand, I love Atlas Shrugged, and the idea that we are going to use government to protect corporations rather than trust in capitalism, I don't agree with that. And there's a scene in There Will Be Blood where he's got to actually negotiate the pipeline land. And I'm sorry, I think that's what you have to do. If you have to go get baptized and sell your soul, I just don't think we should be putting eminent domain powers in the hands of private enterprise. I don't care what industry it is. So I'm going to move that we actually instruct staff to tell our illustrious leadership in the state, Senate and House, that we would be against Senate Bill 93 as currently written.
I'll second that. Councilmember Christensen.
I heartily agree for different reasons, or some of the same, but if you look at Section 2, 38.5, 102, 103, and 104, they specifically do grant access to state land and the power of companies to contract on any land, it says here, and right-of-way across private land. And I think we're trying to, in addition to granting private companies the right to have eminent domain, which should be, in my opinion, unconstitutional for the country, we are trying to second-guess the Supreme Court that specifically excluded them from this. So I don't think that's a particularly good idea. And my guess is they excluded them because some of the other places, the other entities like light power and gas companies are publicly regulated entities, whereas a pipeline company is just a private company. And they should never have the right to have eminent domain. And in fact, government should use it incredibly sparingly. I think we all realize that private property is one of the founding things of this country. So.
Okay, we've got a motion that's been seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 7-0. Councilman Wilson.
Yes, Mayor. So I guess I didn't make a motion because I didn't know if anyone had an opportunity to read material, or as a matter of getting up at any of these meetings when we're in NLC to say, our city supports this as an official position. And maybe in the future we might want to take up a resolution. But I was just looking, maybe I guess I'll just go ahead and make a motion that that we support the Colorado Municipal League resolution that was passed supporting the retrofitting of the rail tank cars and for railroads to provide emergency responders with real-time information regarding materials and advocating that position.
Council, Okay, it's been seconded. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandy, have you seen this?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Santos, yes. Sarah Loveson brought this back to me after her last CML board meeting.
Has other staff seen this? Has transportation staff seen this?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, it's a pretty open concept. It doesn't conflict with any of the current policies of the city. Staff just asking for notification for hazardous materials being transported.
Okay. I don't believe I have any problem with this, but the other topics that come up, the one from Senator Bennett, usually council does not take positions on topics like that, because then we'll have everybody and everyone coming before council asking for resolutions on everything. And I don't want to have meetings, public invited to be heard on just about everything. I don't want, and not to knock our sister city to the west, but I don't want to have public invited to be heard of 3 hours on every topic known to man. So I'm just curious, had that been, at least staff had seen it.
And Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Santos, I think the difference is that oftentimes the council chooses not to take positions on sort of larger political issues that really aren't affected specifically by municipal government, that are really, kind of the conversation at the federal level. I think you're speaking around the immigration conversation. I think we've had this come up before, and council has generally shied away from those conversations that are federal legislation that doesn't directly impact. When it does impact, so for example, in this case, the rail cars would be notifying local public safety agencies, and so when it does impact or it does intersect, so things like that, CDBG and home funding, which you'll see an email that I'm sending out as well, that's being cut. So those types of things, when they have that direct municipal pipeline, then those are generally the things that we have asked council to take positions on. Of course, it's the council's right to do whatever you'd like to do around that.
Okay. Well, I guess I didn't necessarily disagree. I just don't think you should shoot the messenger when you.
Oh, no. I wouldn't know. No, I wouldn't love the messenger.
Well,
I love the messenger.
And as I stated, we can support it or not. It isn't really at the level of this government level.
I understand.
And,
love the messenger.
Well, I just have been waiting to say that to you for a long time.
Love the messenger.
I guess I've got some questions on the whole rail car. I mean, to me, it makes sense that they should have a manifest of what trains are carrying, so that and stuff like that. I just don't know. I'm just ignorant on what they're going to do to the train cars to make them safe, and so I feel a little kind of reluctant to want to weigh in on that part of it. I mean, stuff that makes sense, it's easy to do, I can kind of support that. But, I guess I have mixed feelings just because I don't know. I mean, it might be the greatest thing in the world. I just haven't read it, to be honest. Councilman Wilson.
Well, I guess the blurb that was in the CML newsletter about 3 or 4 weeks ago had fleshed out some of the issues. I guess it hasn't risen to us because we don't have, we've not been, besides the quiet zone issue, we have been closely collaborating with some of our other cities close by who have been working on this issue for quite a while. Fort Collins has already passed a resolution. The city of Palisades passed the similar resolution on first reading. The city of Denver, and I think that part of it, the reason why I felt an urgency after we considered it at the board meeting, is that I really see that this is a statewide issue. This is why CML, and to be able to speak also to our representatives when they're considering just, and the rulemaking is going on. So had we known about the rulemaking early enough about quiet zones, we could have jumped in. Here's an opportunity for us to be supportive of a position where, would give our first responders some real-time information, and then also simply ask that the agency that's considering this work, Federal Railroad Administration, also looks at just making sure that the cars that are transporting these hazardous materials are strong enough and are in good enough condition to transport the material. That's all. Just say, well, gee, just like getting funding for railroad, for our highway system, gee, we'd like you to make sure we have money to have better highways.
Okay, you've made a motion, and it was seconded by Polly, so let's vote on that motion. Okay, it passes 7-0. I just would like to say I went on a great tour of County Road 80 up to Longmont Reservoir and Longmont Dam, and it was very, I was just shocked at how much progress that they've made. It was a great tour, and I really thank the city for, orchestrating that for me, and Ken Houston was awesome. We have a young engineer from Texas A&M. I think right now he's named, right? Josh, yeah. Great, smart kid. Enjoyed him too, so.
So, point of clarification, he's from Texas Tech, and so. so being a fellow Red Raider, we don't being associated with the Aggies.
Okay, sorry. All right. So, city manager, any comments?
So staff has provided you with some talking points for your trip to Washington next week. One of those was related to FEMA and debris removal and additional funding in that. As I stated to some of you earlier, the process is continuing to evolve. There has been some indication from FEMA that they will fund debris removal on private property. So we wanted you to be aware of that. So if you start talking about the issue and they say, well, here's the decision, we've made this decision, that you're not surprised with that. If we're able to get you more specifics on this before you leave to Washington, we will. But we're not going to guarantee that. We're still trying to learn and understand exactly what they mean. And how we move through that process. We do know that they're changing some directions, and to read you something that FEMA released on this, they're saying this action is consistent with the agency policy. The policy hasn't changed, the conditions have changed, and further information has been provided that clearly defines the nature and locations of the threats. And so specifically this is dealing with the NRCS and the number of projects they're working on, and I think capacity for them to handle this issue. So that world's changing on us, and that changed within the last few days. It's a good thing for us, but what we're saying is we just don't know exactly what that means, and we wanted you all to be aware of that as you're moving, as you have conversations with our federal representatives.
I had a brief question.
Thank
you, Mayor Coombs. Did you guys know that Jim Davies quit? The guy who's the head of the Department of Public Safety. That's over. Yeah, he quit. Yeah, a former FBI guy. He's no longer there. He quit to do consulting, which is interesting. Anyway, Sandy, I was going to ask you too, if it's easy for you to cut and paste and send us, maybe on Thursday when you know where we're at on everything, just a new list of things we need to talk about, talking points, that would be awesome.
Here comes Councilmember Finley. Absolutely, I'd be happy to do that. The answer may be we don't know anything else. I mean, I think that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great.
And as these issues come up in terms of flood recovery, when we say we get information weekly or in some cases daily, we may actually email you all when you're there if something pops up. And so again, as conditions change, more information, federal agencies get tapped in terms of what they can provide. It then brings in other agencies that we're working with. So.
Okay, city attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
adjourned.